Welcome, traveler. Tonight we return once more to the quiet world beneath the northern sky, where stories sleep beneath stone and every whisper of water carries memory. Breathe slowly. Let the noise of the day fade. This is the lore of Riften. The water remembers, and tonight it will speak. Part 1. The Lake that Remembers. There is a lake at the edge of the world. The people who live beside it call it Honrich, a quiet gray mirror that holds both the city and its shadow. When dawn breaks, it does not blaze with light. It stirs slowly, like something that remembers before it awakens. The fishermen say the lake has moods. They say it listens, that when the fog rolls in, it is not weather, but memory. The past returning to breathe over the water again. Every ripple carries a whisper of what once happened here. The fire, the rebuilding, the laughter that dissolved into the dark. Even the wood that holds Riften's docks is old enough to remember being a tree. Riften is a city born twice, once from ambition, once from ash. The first Riften, so the stories say, was bright and golden. Its markets filled with laughter, its canals clean enough to drink from. But wealth is a fragile thing, and in this part of the world, beauty tends to attract flame. It burned. No one agrees who started the fire. Some blame bandits, others a careless lamp. And there are those who whisper that the gods themselves grew tired of hearing lies spoken over the water. When the ashes cooled, only the lake remained. It reflected the sky without preference, and in that reflection, the survivors saw themselves. Dirty, desperate, but still alive. So they began again. They rebuilt not upon stone, but upon the lake itself. Wooden planks rose over the black water, bridges and walkways layered above the memory of what had been. If Whiterun was the heart of the plains and solitude the crown of the empire, then Riften was the pulse beneath the ribs. Bushes, a place that beat quietly, stubbornly, in the dark. When you first enter the city, you notice the smell. It is not the stench of rot, nor the sweetness of flowers, but something between. Wet timber, smoke, and the faint iron tang of coins rubbed too long between dirty fingers. It is the scent of trade, of survival. The scent of a city that refuses to die. The sound follows. Water slapping against wood, boots creaking on old planks, a hammer from the blacksmith's corner punctuating the hum of merchants arguing over cabbage and honey. Above all this, the gulls cry like prophets that no one listens to. They circle and circle and circle, always returning to the same point, as if the city itself were a wound they could not help but pick at. There is something strange about Riften's light. Even on a clear day, it feels subdued, filtered through mist and memory. The sun never quite finds its way to the cobblestones. It hovers above, turning everything the color of wet bronze. Lanterns hang along every bridge and doorframe, not for beauty, but necessity. Here, light is not decoration. It is defense, against the fog, against the forgetting. If you stand still long enough by the docks, you will see the water move differently under each bridge. Some parts shimmer gently, others swirl as if something below is still stirring. Fishermen cast their nets in silence, not to catch fish, but to test the current, to make sure it still obeys the laws of nature and not the will of ghosts. Every city has a voice. Riften's is low, hoarse from secrets softened by water. You hear it in the way merchants bargain, not shouting, but whispering, as if afraid the lake will remember their prices. You hear it in the guards' boots, their rhythm more cautious than proud. And you hear it in the laughter of the thieves, that nervous, knowing kind of joy that belongs only to those who live too close to danger. Some cities speak of glory. Riften murmurs of compromise. It is said that long ago, when the city was still being rebuilt, workers discovered something buried beneath the lake. Metal chambers, half filled with water, and tunnels that led nowhere but deeper. They thought it was Dwemer in origin, a ruin perhaps, or the bones of an older machine. But there were no gears, no markings, no light, just silence. The builders sealed it, hammered new planks above it, and swore never to speak of it again. Now, when the wind shifts at night and the moonlight hits the water at just the right angle, some say you can see bubbles rise from the black depths, as if something below has remembered to breathe. Of course, it may just be gas from the swamp. But then so many truths begin as excuses. Near the city's center stands the Temple of Mara, small, round, and humble, its roof shaped like a held breath. From its doorway, you can see nearly every street and every sin. Its bells do not toll loudly. They tremble, barely audible over the market noise. The priests speak softly of love and unity, words that sound almost foreign here. Yet people come. They come to marry, to pray, or simply to rest in the one place in Riften that smells of clean air and candle wax instead of damp timber. Some find peace in its light. Others find guilt. But everyone finds reflection, for even the water that runs beneath the temple is clearer than anywhere else in the city. It is as though Mara herself insists on at least one honest surface in Riften, even if it must live below the floorboards. And then there are the willows. They grow by the edges of the lake, their roots deep in the mud, their long green fingers brushing the water like thoughts they cannot quite forget. The people of Riften barely notice them, but they have been there longer than any merchant, any thief, any guard. When the wind moves through their branches, the sound is soft, like someone sighing after a long confession. Some say that if you sit beneath them long enough, you begin to remember things you never lived, as if the lake shares its dreams through the roots. Once, an old priest from Mara's temple said that the willows are the city's forgiveness. They bend, but never break. They weep, but never drown. In them, the city learns how to endure itself. If you walk the streets of Riften at dawn, you see a different kind of beauty than in Whiterun or Solitude. It is not clean. It is not proud. It is real. The planks beneath your feet are uneven, the water beneath them black and alive. Smoke curls from chimneys where the poor heat, stale bread, and the merchants set out their wares, salted fish, cheap trinkets, stolen rings, and sometimes a prayer whispered into the air before the day begins. Even corruption here feels sincere. There is honesty in survival. The Stoics taught that virtue is not the absence of sin, but the awareness of it, and in that awareness, the choice to endure rather than despair. Riften embodies this truth. It does not hide its rot. It builds around it, learns from it, and in doing so, becomes something closer to wisdom than purity. At the lake's edge, an old fisherman sits with a line that rarely catches anything. He says he does not fish for food anymore. He fishes for remembrance. Every ripple, he says, is a story trying to come back. He tosses a stone into the water, watches the circles spread and fade, and nods to himself as if he's heard an answer. Then he whispers, "Riften listens if you do." You ask him what that means, but he only smiles. The city's built on water, he says, and water remembers everything that touches it. If you lie to it, it will reflect you crooked. If you listen, it will show you truth. He lowers his dittwen again and closes his eyes. You notice that the reflection of the city in the lake wavers, just slightly out of sync with the one above. Two Riftens, one real, one remembered, and between them, the truth, waiting quietly beneath the ripples. The lake does not judge. It only remembers. The people of Riften live upon it, and in doing so, they live inside their own reflection. A fragile world of bridges and shadows, built on the water's patience. Every lie spoken in the market, every prayer whispered in the temple, every coin dropped into a thief's hand, the lake keeps them all, not as sin, but as story. And so it watches, it listens, and it waits. For memory, like water, does not fade. It only changes depth. Part 2. Beneath the docks. Beneath the planks, the city hums. It is not the hum of machines, nor the chant of prayer, but the steady, wet breathing of wood and water. Each beam that holds the weight of Riften has swollen and shrunken for generations, drinking the lake's patience and giving it back in size. Down here, the city feels alive, older, slower, and more honest than the one that sells apples and armor above. The first thing you notice is the sound. Drops falling at uneven intervals, like time measured by a hand that's forgotten rhythm. A rat scurries, claws whispering across soaked planks. Chains sway where the water laps at stone. And somewhere deeper still, a soft, hollow echo repeats itself, as if the mountain beneath were speaking in its sleep. No one builds upon water without knowing the risk. When the fire devoured old Riften, the survivors made a choice: to rebuild upon what could never burn. They drove piles into the lake bed and laid new planks over the ash, believing that what the flame had taken, the water would protect. It was a kind of faith, not in gods, but in elements. And yet, every protection becomes a prison in time. Now, those same planks creak under the boots of smugglers and thieves. The gaps between boards have widened, the air beneath smells of damp rope and forgotten debts. In the stillness, you can hear two worlds breathing: the city above, with its commerce and deception, and the lake below, patient, unchanging, always listening. Children are told not to wander near the lower bridges at night. Their parents say the boards are weak, that they'll fall in and drown. But those who have lived long in Riften know the truth is simpler. It's not the fall that's dangerous. It's what you might hear before you hit the water. Old tales speak of voices rising from beneath the docks. Not ghosts, not spirits, but memories too heavy to sink. Sometimes it's laughter, sometimes a whisper calling an old name, and sometimes it's nothing at all, which somehow feels worse. Memory leaks through wood, says a dock worker with gray in his beard. It's not the planks that creak, it's what's under them, trying to come up for air. He laughs when he says it, but you can tell he believes every word. The underside of Riften is a map of contradictions. Pillars thick as tree trunks rise from the blackness, some carved, others rotted smooth. Bridges cross bridges in forgotten layers, and between them move the quiet ones. Fishermen who mend their nets in the dark, traders who prefer not to declare their cargo, and those who carry messages no one else dares to deliver. Every few meters, a shaft of light pierces through a crack in the boards above, cutting across the damp air like a blade. In that beam, dust and mist hang together, turning the darkness into something almost holy. Then, just as quickly, the light fades. Riften does not reveal itself all at once. It offers fragments and expects patience in return. You begin to see how the city was built, not in order, but in reaction. Every bridge was raised because something below it failed. Every wall exists because something behind it could not be trusted. The architecture is confession, each layer hiding the regret of the last. And yet, this is what keeps it standing. A city of compromises, of wooden sins balanced atop one another. It leans and groans, but it holds. Like a man who has lied often enough to believe himself, Riften's strength lies in its memory of weakness. Near the eastern pier, where the water grows shallow, you can still see the remnants of the first foundations, blackened stone, worn smooth by decades of current. Moss grows over them like old bandages. Here, the city touches what it used to be. Children sometimes dive there in summer, coming up with handfuls of coal and rusted nails. The older folk call those things the bones of the city. They say each one carries a story too stubborn to fade. When asked why they don't clear it, a mason once said, "Because if we take away what's beneath us, we'll have nothing left to stand on." It's easy to forget how close Riften is to the water. From the market above, you can walk for days and never see the lake directly, only glimpses between buildings, reflections in puddles, and the faint glimmer of torches wavering beneath the floorboards. The people have learned to live with the sound of it, as one learns to live with a heartbeat. Always there, so constant it disappears into silence. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, the city stirs. The tide shifts, and the whole structure seems to breathe. Wood stretches, iron groans, and 1,000 tiny echoes move beneath your feet. The people sleep through it, but the city does not. Riften dreams. There are men who make their living in this dream. The dock thieves, experts in patience. They move like shadows, lifting crates without sound, sliding letters between the slats for gold. To them, the docks are not danger, but opportunity, a living labyrinth that rewards the quiet and punishes the careless. "Up there," one of them says, pointing toward the marketplace, "they lie with words. Down here, we lie with silence." He grins, his teeth bright against the dark. Different gods, same prayer. There's truth in that. Beneath the docks, morality feels thinner, like light filtered through deep water. Right and wrong blur until only necessity remains. It's not evil that thrives here, it's adaptation. Still, not all who walk these boards are lost. Sometimes priests from the Temple of Mara descend to bless the lower waters. They carry small lanterns, their reflections trembling on the surface. They say prayers for the forgotten, for those who slipped and were never found. The thieves watch from the shadows, quiet, almost respectful, not out of faith, but out of understanding. There's something about seeing light float on water that makes even the most hardened man remember he was once a child. The lanterns drift slowly until the dark takes them back, and the city exhales. Philosophers speak of depth as wisdom, but the Stoics warned, not all depth is virtue, some is merely decay. The trick is learning which is which. Riften understands this in its bones. It is a city that has learned to live with both. The rot supports the surface. The decay feeds the structure. And in that paradox lies endurance. To the untrained eye, the docks look unstable. To those who belong here, they are a kind of truth. Everything is temporary. Every board, every bridge, every coin. But as long as the rhythm continues, the soft lap of water, the creak of timber, the illusion holds. And sometimes, illusion is enough to survive. If you lean over the edge of the lowest pier, you can see your reflection, not clear, but trembling, split by ripples. Behind it, beneath it, another face flickers, darker, slower, as if the water is remembering you differently. Maybe it's the current, maybe it's the lake, storing one more image among the countless others it has kept. Either way, you realize the truth that Riften whispers to those who listen long enough. What lies beneath is never gone. It waits, patient as wood. It endures like guilt. It forgives like water. Part 3. The City of Mirrors. Riften is a city that looks at itself too often. Its people live surrounded by water and glass, in mirrors of brass and puddles of rain, in the dark sheen of windows and the endless reflections of canals beneath their feet. Everywhere, faces repeat, in stalls, in coins, in eyes that learn to lie softly. It is a city that cannot look away from itself, and yet never truly sees what it's looking at. From above, Riften glows faintly at dawn. its wet roofs glimmering like the scales of a sleeping fish. From below, in the water's dark reflection, the same glow trembles, broken by ripples, doubled by mist. Two cities, one above, one beneath, forever trading places whenever the wind stirs the surface. To live here is to learn that truth and its reflection are never still at the same time. Walk through the marketplace in the morning and you'll see the first faces appear. Merchants setting up stalls, children chasing each other across bridges, a guard leaning against a post, pretending not to notice the cutpurse behind him. Everything seems ordinary, but if you look closer, you see how each person watches the other as though afraid of being mistaken for the reflection instead of the original. It is not paranoia, it is survival. In Riften, your reflection can become your witness or your accuser. A woman selling apples wipes her stall clean every hour, not because of dust, but because she cannot stand the way her own face stares back at her in the wet wood. A bard who plays by the canal never looks down. He says once he saw someone's shadow singing back to him a heartbeat late. And an old beggar near the gate swears that when the water freezes, it traps the lies spoken that day, keeping them preserved beneath the ice until spring releases them again. Perhaps he's mad, or perhaps he simply listens better than most. The mirrors of Riften are not made of glass. They are made of attention, of suspicion, of stories told one too many times. Each rumor that crosses the market reflects a truth from a different angle, a crooked echo of something real. You cannot tell what is honest here, says a jeweler, polishing a necklace that gleams like frost. But if you look long enough, the lies begin to tell on themselves. She smiles, half kind, half knowing. Even gold shows its true color when the fire cools. It's an unspoken rule in Riften: never trust a clear reflection. Clarity here means something is hiding just out of sight. Inside Mistveil Keep, the light falls differently. The windows are narrow, the walls built thick to muffle sound. When the sun manages to pierce the smoke and mist, it lands on polished floors that mirror the banners above. Each step echoes twice, once in sound, once in the faint shimmer that follows your boots. It is a hall built to remember authority and to remind those who walk it that power too is a reflection, bright only because of what stands in shadow. The Jarl's court is quieter now than in the days of rebellion. Disputes are smaller, more personal. A farmer accusing a trader of cheating him on honey. A guard demanding more pay for night shifts by the canals. Even the arguments sound tired, as if the city itself is weary of pretending righteousness. But beneath the politeness, beneath the words, "My Jarl," and "by your leave," you can still hear the water, steady, patient, unimpressed. It reminds you that no verdict lasts forever. Everything sinks eventually. At the edge of the square stands a small mirror stall, its owner an eccentric old Nord named Elsin. He makes no weapons, sells no charms, only mirrors, polished from Dwemer scrap, framed in driftwood and copper. Few buy them, but many stop to look. When asked why he does it, he answers simply, "Because people here forget what they look like when they're honest." He lifts a round mirror, cloudy but bright, and shows you your reflection. It shimmers, the light from the canal dancing across your face, turning your features into something half real. It's not the mirror that changes, he says, it's the air between you and it. You realize, standing there, that this city has taught its people to mistrust their own eyes. To see is to question. To reflect is to remember what you'd rather forget. There's a reason the Temple of Mara feels so far away, even though it stands only a few streets from the docks. It's not the distance, it's the difference. Its candles glow steady, its water clear. It is the one place in Riften where reflections are whole. For those who come from the streets, it feels unnatural. They lower their eyes, as if afraid that honesty might blind them. The priests do not judge. They've learned that salvation offered too loudly sounds too much like a bargain. Sometimes, when the sun sets, the light from the temple or crosses the water and lands upon the canal beneath the market. For a brief moment, the reflection of Mara's light touches the reflection of the thieves' shadows. It is the city's truest moment of balance, holiness meeting guilt, and neither ashamed to exist beside the other. The philosopher from Cyrodiil once wrote, "We are not what we show, but what we hide while showing." He could have been speaking of Riften. Every glance here carries weight. A merchant's nod might mean trust or threat. A mile could be an apology or a warning. The people have learned to live between meanings, their words shaped by caution rather than deceit. It is a kind of wisdom, born not from purity, but from experience. The Stoics taught that perception is choice, that a man cannot be harmed by appearances if he understands their nature. And perhaps that is Riften's secret. It has been deceived so long that it no longer fears deception. It has learned to see beauty even in distortion. As night falls, the water grows darker, the city lights multiplying upon its surface. Lanterns bloom like small suns, each reflection trembling but unbroken. You lean over the railing and watch them sway, counting perhaps 30 or 40 lights. But you can't tell which are real and which belong to the lake. Somewhere, a lute plays. A soft, slow tune, not joyous, but patient. The notes wander through the fog, settle on the water, and disappear. Above, a thief watches from the rafters of the fishery, his shadow cast long and thin by the moon. He sees you, but does not move. Perhaps he's studying his own reflection in your eyes. You realize then that Riften is not merely a city built on water. It is a city built on the act of seeing. To live here is to exist in dialogue with one's own reflection, to measure truth by how it wavers, not by how still it stands. For water never lies, but it never tells the whole truth either. The lake reflects the city, and the city reflects the soul. Both are flawed, both are beautiful, and in their imperfection, they endure. Part 4. The Fire and the Rebuilding. Before the water, there was fire. The people of Riften still speak of it in half-whispers, as if too much air might bring the flames back. They call it the burning, and though generations have passed, the scent of ash still lingers in the wood. You can smell it when the rain falls heavy, the memory of smoke sealed into the boards. No one agrees how it began. Some say it was raiders from the south, others a forgotten lamp in the warehouse district, and there are those who insist that it was punishment, the gods growing weary of a city that had grown too rich in deceit. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. Riften burned for 3 days and 3 nights. The first day, the fire spread like hunger. It leapt from roof to roof, fed by timber dried from summer sun and greed. The canals boiled, steam rising like ghosts as the flames licked the sky. People ran, shouting names, swallowed by the wind, and the lake turned red with reflected light. From the hills, travelers said the fire looked like dawn, a false sunrise consuming its own creation. The second day, there was no city left to save, only choices, to flee or to remain and bury what remained. Those who stayed described the silence that followed the crackling, a silence thick with disbelief. Ash fell like gray snow, coating faces, roofs, and bodies alike. It was then that the old walls collapsed, taking with them the weight of every lie ever spoken within them. The third day, the wind turned, the fire, finally tired, began to fade, and in the smoldering ruins beside Lake Honrik, a few figures moved, not to rebuild, not yet, but to understand what had been taken. They dug through ash, found coins melted into lumps, rings fused to bones, and documents turned to ghosts of ink. Some wept, most simply stared. From that ruin, the new Riften was born, not in triumph, but in exhaustion. The survivors gathered by the lake, their hands blistered, their voices raw. They spoke not of vengeance, but of shelter. One woman, whose name is lost to time, is said to have stood upon the scorched docks and said, "If the ground will not hold us, then we will build upon the water." It was not poetry. It was desperation turned into courage. And so they did. They cut new planks from the nearby forest, drove posts deep into the lake bed, and built the bones of a city that could float. Not because it was easy, but because it was the only way to survive. Each hammer strike was both creation and confession. Every nail driven into wet timber felt like an apology to the gods, to each other, to the fire itself. In those early years, Riften was smaller, quieter. No guilds, no banners, no politics. Only people rebuilding what they could remember. The lake served as mirror and grave both. Fishermen found coins instead of fish. Children played on planks that swayed with the wind. At night, the city glowed softly, its reflection trembling in the black water. They did not know it then, but they had created something rare, a city suspended between ruin and rebirth. Scholars later called this period the humble years. They say crime vanished, and neighbors shared food instead of rumors. It did not last. Nothing pure ever does. But for a time, Riften was something close to honest. The fire had burned away pretense, and in its ashes, humility took root. Yet even humility, like wood, eventually rots. As trade returned, so did ambition. Merchants came from Morrowind and Cyrodiil, drawn by cheap land and easy access to the lake. They built warehouses on the new piers, expanded the markets, and reintroduced the language of profit to a citadel that had just learned the language of patience. The Blackbriars arrived during this second founding. Maven's ancestors, traders of mead and metal, clever, ruthless, and endlessly adaptable. They offered coin when the people had none, supplied timber and guards in exchange for influence. The city accepted because hunger makes honest men pragmatic, and thus, quietly, Riften's soul was mortgaged. If you look closely at the foundations today, you can still tell which beams were laid by survivors and which by merchants. The older planks are rougher, cut by hand, uneven but alive. The newer ones are perfect, straight, polished, varnished against the truth. They creak differently too. The old wood sighs, the new wood calculates. One speaks of endurance, the other of ownership. The fire had destroyed Riften's buildings, but not its habits. The new city would not burn again. It would decay instead, slowly, beautifully, inevitably. Like gold left in water, its brilliance would tarnish, but it would remain whole enough to admire. Every city must decide what to build upon. Some choose faith, some choose law. Riften chose memory. Its foundations are soaked in it, its air heavy with it. The people walk upon the past every day, their steps echoing softly over drowned streets. To live here is to be reminded that nothing truly perishes, it simply changes form. The Stoics said that fire purifies what it cannot destroy. Perhaps the same is true for cities. The fire stripped Riften of illusion. What rose from the ashes was not innocence, but awareness, a kind of strength that does not shine, but endures. Once each year, when the fog is thickest, the citizens light small candles and place them in the canals. They drift silently through the city, their reflections doubling the light until it seems the water itself is on fire again. The people do not weep. They watch. Some whisper names. Others simply close their eyes and let the glow wash over them. The old priests say it is not mourning, but gratitude. a way of thanking the flame for teaching them how to survive the dark. When the last candle fades into the mist, the city exhales, the water grows calm again, and beneath the surface, the old beams shift and settle. A quiet reminder that Riften was not rebuilt by architects or kings, but by hands that refused to stop building. And if you listen closely, you can still hear those hands hammering softly somewhere beneath the docks. Not ghosts, not memories, just the sound of endurance, continuing its work. Part 5. The Blackbriar Rain. After the ashes cooled and the city found its reflection again in the lake, a different kind of fire took root, one that burned cold and steady. The Blackbriar family did not seize Riften. They absorbed it. They arrived in silence, in the gaps left behind by the ruin. When the people were too tired to hope and too poor to resist, they came bearing wood, nails, and coin, the three things any broken city needs to believe in a future. Their matriarch, Maven, was already known in the Reach and the plains beyond, a woman of calculation whose smile weighed the worth of a man faster than his words could. She did not promise kindness. She promised permanence. And to a city haunted by loss, that was enough. "Stone burns," she said once, her voice low as smoke, "but gold survives the flame." At first, her name was spoken with gratitude. The new piers she funded gleamed in the dawn light. The guards she paid from her own coffers stood straighter, their armor bright, their hands firm. Merchants reopened their stalls, and the Temple of Mara received offerings again, not from faith, but from relief. To the people, Maven was not a ruler. She was the heartbeat that had returned to a corpse. But hearts can be deceptive things. Each coin she gave out carried the quiet weight of return. Each favor she offered was a bridge that led only one way, toward her. She understood what most rulers never learned, that control does not require conquest. It only requires debt. Soon, the guards who once served the Jarl listened first to Maven's messengers. The merchants traded not with coin, but with credit written in her ledgers. Even the thieves began to whisper her name with a kind of reverence, not fear exactly, but recognition. The city was learning a new language, that of silent obedience. Maven did not sit on a throne. She did not need to. Her authority flowed like water through cracks, invisible but everywhere. When a deal was struck in the market, a portion of the profit found its way back to her. When a smuggler crossed the docks unnoticed, it was because her gold had bought the right pair of eyes to look the other way. Even the temple candles burned longer because her mead barrels paid for the wax. And in this quiet control, the city thrived. The fires of hunger dimmed. The streets filled with noise again, the good kind of noise, hammers, bargaining, laughter. Children played between stalls, and the guards did not harass them as long as their parents paid the right dues. It was order, artificial perhaps. But Riften had learned that peace built on deceit still felt like peace. Visitors from Solitude called Maven a tyrant. Imperial traders described her as a merchant queen, but the people of Riften called her something else, Mother of the Mead. It was not an insult. It was survival wrapped in affection. The Blackbriar Meadery became the symbol of this new age. Its barrels rolled down the streets like promises, its scent thick in the air, honey, oak, and quiet authority. Each sip carried her influence deeper into the blood of the city. Those who drank it toasted her name with pride. Those who didn't kept their silence. Both forms of respect served her equally well. Maven's genius lay not in cruelty, but in patience. She understood that fear shouts, but power whispers. Her reign was not an era of bloodshed, it was an era of stillness. And stillness can be the most dangerous condition of all. The Jarl, Mistveil's figurehead, remained at her post, like a candle flickering in daylight. She signed papers, hosted councils, and said all the right words about order and law. But behind every decree, Maven's ink had already dried first. Her influence reached even the smallest corners of Riften's life, from the way bread was priced at the market to who was allowed to sell it. And yet, for all this shadowed control, the city did not resent her. They admired her, for she gave them something no ruler had offered in centuries: predictability. They knew how to live beneath her, and that was a kind of peace. But beneath the surface, under the docks and behind the taverns, a quiet rebellion stirred. Not a rebellion of swords, but of silence. There were those who remembered the fire not as punishment, but as warning. They whispered that Riften had traded one ruin for another, that gold could drown a city faster than flame. They saw how the poor no longer begged. They borrowed instead, how the priests spoke of Mara with voices funded by her coin, and how every honest man eventually became her debtor. And yet none of them acted, not because they lacked courage, but because they understood futility. The Blackbriar name was now written into the rhythm of the city itself, its breath, its heartbeat, its reflection. To fight her was to fight Riften. The Stoics spoke of virtue as something internal, unaffected by wealth or ruin. They would have found Riften fascinating. Here was a city that proved endurance could mimic virtue, that survival itself could be mistaken for morality. For what is corruption if it brings order? What is fear if it buys safety? And what is sin if everyone sins the same way? In that paradox, the people found comfort. They had forgotten how to dream of justice, but they remembered how to live. And so they did, quietly, gratefully, under the reign of a woman who had turned survival into philosophy. Sometimes, when the fog lifts from the lake at dawn, you can still see her reflection in the water, not her face, but her presence. The faint glimmer of torchlight on gold, the echo of a voice that does not need to shout to be obeyed. The city continues on, its planks creaking softly like the sigh of something content in its captivity. Riften does not weep for its masters. It learns from them, and in that learning, it endures. Part 6. The Market of Masks. Morning comes slowly to Riften. The fog does not rise, it unfolds, peeling back from the water as if reluctant to reveal the day. And through that mist, the market awakens. The first sounds are always the same. Wooden shutters creaking open, a cough echoing through an empty square, the splash of a bucket overturned into the canal. Then a rhythm builds. Boots against planks, coins clinking in cold fingers, and the hum of voices rehearsing the same lines they have spoken for years. Riften's market is not like those of Whiterun or Solitude. It does not boast. It endures. It breathes through habit. And habit, as every philosopher knows, is the mask that survival wears. By sunrise, the square is alive. Merchants arrange their wares beneath sagging awnings, apples from Falkreath, furs from the Rift, fish still slick with lake water. The air smells of salt and smoke and honeyed mead leaking from cracked barrels. Everything looks ordinary, yet nothing here is without purpose. Each merchant knows the space he owns and the debts he owes. The guards pass by not to protect, but to remind. And somewhere above, from behind a curtained window, someone unseen watches, counting gestures, measuring glances. Riften's market is a stage, and every actor knows their line. There is no honesty here, not in the way outsiders mean it. There is only precision. The lie must fit perfectly. The smile must be symmetrical. The offer must sound like generosity, even when it bleeds. At the heart of the market stands an old stone well, its water black, its bucket long rotted away. No one drinks from it anymore. The priests say the fire of years past poisoned it, that ash settled deep in its depths and turned purity to memory. Still, each morning, someone throws a coin into it, not as prayer, but as insurance. a small payment to whatever spirits keep the water still. Around the well, life spirals like smoke. Two beggars share bread and gossip. A young woman haggles for spice she doesn't need. A boy runs with a stolen apple, his laughter bright as the morning air before disappearing into the fog. None of it feels wrong. In Riften, deceit has learned to smile. The merchants know how to sell more than goods. They sell comfort to those who cannot afford hope. The fishmonger swears her catch was pulled from Lake Honrik itself, though everyone knows she buys them from a caravan 2 towns north. The jeweler polishes trinkets made of tin and calls them Dwemer relics. The alchemist sells empty vials, claiming the potions vanished because the buyer needed them more. And the buyers nod, smile, and pay. Because sometimes it is easier to purchase a lie than to admit the truth. A merchant once said, "Gold is like reflection. It only shows what's already there." And he was right. In Riften, the market mirrors the soul of the city. Corrupt, beautiful, efficient, alive. A Dunmer woman named Naren runs the stall nearest the temple steps. She sells scarves dyed in impossible colors, blue like glacier ice, red like dawn seen through smoke. She tells each customer the same story, that the dyes come from flowers that bloom once a year on the northern cliffs, watered by the tears of ghosts. No one believes her, not really, but her voice is soft, and her eyes are kind in that tired way only the honest liars have. People buy from her because they want to be told something beautiful, even if they know it isn't true. When asked how she learned her trade, she once said quietly, "I sell color because everything else in this city is gray." And she smiled, not sadly, but knowingly, as if the act of pretending was, in itself, a kind of devotion. At midday, the temple bells toll. Their sound rolls across the square like a sigh, reminding the market that even lies must pause for breath. For a brief moment, the city seems to listen. Merchants stop counting. Buyers stop speaking. A breeze moves through the square, and in it comes the scent of candles from Mara's temple, clean, sweet, uncorrupted. It cuts through the air like light through dust, but the silence does not last. Within minutes, the bargaining begins again. The coins resume their clatter, and the smell of fish and smoke returns, heavier now. Riften's peace exists only between trades. At the southern edge of the square, a small boy sits beside his mother's stall. He does not beg. He polishes apples with a rag too big for his hands. When asked why he doesn't play, he shrugs. "Because here," he says, "someone always watches." He gestures toward the rooftops, where a shadow passes between chimneys. Perhaps a guard. Perhaps something else. In Riften, eyes are currency. And even a child learns early what it means to be seen. There are rumors of markets beneath this market, places where silence is worth more than gold. Some say Maven herself walks there at night, face hidden, voice disguised, listening to the city breathe. Others claim that the Thieves Guild buys information by the ounce, like salt or sugar. No one admits to visiting, but everyone acts as if they have, because in Riften, reputation is another mask. And sometimes the illusion of danger sells better than safety. By evening, the market glows in the mist. Lanterns sway from ropes like tired stars. The planks beneath your feet creak softly with the rhythm of the water. Shadows grow long, and every voice carries a little more softness, as if fatigue brings truth closer to the surface. Coins exchange hands one last time, and then the stalls close, their curtains drawn like eyelids after a long confession. The square empties. Only the echoes remain, faint, patient, unwilling to leave. A cat slinks across a table. A gull lands near the well, pecks at a piece of bread, and flies off without making a sound. The market sleeps, but its lies do not. They settle into the water below, joining all the others whispered through the years. The lake keeps them all. The Stoics taught that one cannot be deceived if one understands the nature of deception. To them, falsehood was not evil, it was ignorance misunderstood. By that wisdom, Riften's market might be the most enlightened place in Skyrim. Here, everyone knows what everyone else is doing. No one pretends innocence. And in that shared deceit, there is a strange kind of honesty. When dawn comes again, the masks will return to their faces. The merchants will rehearse their smiles. The buyers will count their coins twice, knowing they will still be cheated. And yet all will continue as before. Because here, survival wears many faces, and every one of them must eat. Riften endures, not because its people are pure, but because they have learned the oldest lesson of all. That truth, like gold, shines brightest only when surrounded by shadow. Part 7. The Thieves Guild. Beneath the market, beneath the planks that creak under morning feet, another city breathes. It is darker, quieter, older, built not by architects, but by necessity. Wood rots into tunnels, tunnels merge into chambers, and in those chambers, light survives only because it refuses to die. This is the Ragged Flagon, a place of rumor, refuge, and return, a place where every shadow has a story, and every silence a price. To reach it, you descend through the Ratway, a maze of damp corridors and forgotten stone. The air smells of old wine, smoke, and something metallic, not quite blood, but memory's echo of it. Water drips from the ceiling like the ticking of a slow clock. Every few steps, the light shifts from torch to candle to the faint phosphorescence of moss that has learned how to live without sun. It is not a place for the uninitiated. The stones remember fear too clearly. But for those who belong, the descent is not frightening. It is familiar. The deeper you go, the more honest the city becomes. The Thieves Guild is not a myth, though it prefers to be one. Its members do not wear symbols or swear by gods. They do not speak of loyalty as honor, but as arithmetic. Trust here is measured in silence kept and coins returned. The only law is balance. The only sin is betrayal. Brynjolf, one of its quiet architects, once said, "People think we take because we want, but we take because the world has already stolen from us." He said it with a smile, not defensive, not proud, but with the weary calm of a man who has long accepted his place in the equation of things. Brynjolf understands the truth most rulers ignore, that morality is often the privilege of the comfortable. For the poor, survival is morality. Here in the flickering light of the flagon, men and women drink from dented mugs and talk of risk as if it were weather. A deal gone well is a toast. A deal gone poorly is a silence. There is laughter, but it is soft, restrained, like embers beneath ash, glowing without flame. No one here claims to be good. No one needs to. That, perhaps, is their most honest virtue. The city above may wear masks, but the thieves wear none. They have already confessed, simply by being here. There is a rhythm to the guild's existence, an unspoken code that keeps chaos in check. No killing without reason, no stealing from those who have nothing, no lies among brothers. To outsiders, these rules sound noble. To insiders, they are practical. A city can forgive a thief. It cannot forgive a murderer. For decades, this code held the guild together. Then came Mercer Frey. He was a master of precision, charming, articulate, brilliant in the way lightning is brilliant, beautiful, destructive, impossible to look away from. Under his leadership, the guild prospered. Jobs flowed, coin returned, and even the Jarl's court learned to pretend ignorance for a fair cut of the profit. But power, as Riften has learned too many times, is a fire that feeds only on itself. Mercer broke the code. He did not steal. He consumed. he took from his own. He turned silence into weapon, loyalty into leverage, and in doing so, he taught the guild its most painful lesson, that even thieves can be robbed of their soul. When the betrayal came to light, the guild nearly collapsed. Trust, their only true currency, evaporated overnight. Men who had risked their lives for one another began to move like ghosts, silent, suspicious, each step on the stone echoing the question, who's next? It was Brynjolf who held them together, not through speeches or threats, but through a kind of quiet endurance that matched the city itself. He reminded them what Riften had always been, a place that survives its own corruption. Mercer's gone, he said, but the city still breathes, so will we. And so they did. The guild's relationship with the Blackbriars is complicated. Maven tolerates them the way one tolerates fire, useful, dangerous, never to be trusted. They, in turn, respect her the way one respects a storm. The guild thrives in the spaces she cannot reach. She funds their silences, they protect her shadow. Neither side admits dependence. Both sides know it is mutual. Some scholars have called it symbiosis. Others call it damnation. Riften calls it Tuesday. Every few weeks, a stranger finds their way into the flagon, a drifter, a runaway, a merchant who owes more than he owns. Some are turned away, some are not. The test is simple, not skill, not strength, but silence. If you can sit in the dark and listen without flinching, you are already one of them. The guild's elders believe that silence is not emptiness, but space, the distance between one truth and the next. They move within that distance as easily as others breathe. To them, crime is not rebellion. It is equilibrium. A correction of imbalance, a gentle reminder that no man owns what he cannot keep. The Stoics might have admired them in their way, not for their deeds, but for their detachment. They steal without hatred, they plan without envy, they survive without apology. In a world addicted to justification, they have none, and therefore nothing to defend. Freedom, Brynjolf once said, isn't doing what you want. It's not being owned by what you need. Perhaps that is why the Thieves Guild endures, even when its name is spoken only in warning. It is built not on greed, but on understanding, the kind of understanding that looks directly at the world's hypocrisy and decides to live beneath it instead of within it. Above, in the marketplace, coins still change hands with practiced smiles. In the temple, candles still burn in prayer. And in the palace, laws are written that everyone knows will be broken by dawn. But below, under layers of wood and memory, the thieves move like blood beneath skin, unseen, essential. They keep the city breathing, draining its excess, maintaining its rhythm. They are not heroes. They are not villains. They are the shadow that makes the light visible. At the center of the flagon, a single lantern burns low, its flame trembling against the still air. It has been lit for years, tended by no one, fed by no purpose but persistence. Some say it burns for Nocturnal, the mistress of shadows, the whispering goddess who blesses those who move unseen. Others say it burns for something simpler, for the city itself, for the human need to see, even in darkness. Whatever its reason, the flame remains. It sways with every footstep, every door opened, every breath drawn beneath Riften's streets. And in its reflection, you see the truth that defines the guild, and perhaps the city as well. Light, in the end, belongs only to those who can live without it. Part 8. The Ratway. Beneath the city of mirrors, there lies a city of echoes. The Ratway is not on any map, and those who claim to know its full length are either liars or lost. It stretches beneath Riften like the roots of a diseased tree, a network of tunnels carved by time, patched by thieves, and forgotten by those who built it. To walk its halls is to walk through the city's memory, but not the kind of memory one shares aloud. These are the memories that rot in silence, the ones even the water hesitates to carry. No one knows when the Ratway was first dug. Some say it began as a smuggler's path, used to move mead and contraband past the old imperial taxes. Others claim the tunnels predate the city itself, Dwemer relics repurposed and reassembled by desperate hands. The truth, as always in Riften, is probably both and neither. The stones are mismatched, the arches uneven, the walls wet with condensation that smells faintly of rust and moss. Somewhere above, the footsteps of the living world echo, faint, distant, like the heartbeat of a creature that has long since forgotten its body. Light filters through cracks in the planks overhead, but it is not sunlight. It is borrowed, reflected from torches and fire pits above. The Ratway does not create light. It steals it, holds it, and never gives it back the same. The people who live here are not criminals, not exactly. They are what the city above refuses to see. Runaways, debtors, forgotten soldiers, men and women who fell through the cracks and found a kind of peace in the dark. They build their homes from scraps of broken carts and shipwreck wood, their walls draped with rags that still smell faintly of the lake. Down here, even air has a price, but no one asks questions, and that, in Riften, is a rare mercy. There is a tavern, if it can be called that, a hollowed-out chamber with 3 barrels and a plank for a counter. Its keeper, a man with one eye and no name, serves only one drink, water mixed with a drop of mead. He calls it the surface. Because that's what it tastes like, he says with a grin. Close enough to hope, but not quite. The others laugh when he says it. It's not a cruel laugh, it's the kind that admits recognition. They all know what he means. The Ratway has no laws, but it has rules. They are older than any edict, passed down not in speech but in caution. Do not follow a sound you can't see. Do not touch the water if it moves against the current. Do not look too long at your reflection in the puddles, for down here, reflections remember more than faces. There are stories of people who saw themselves blink from the wrong side of the mirror, of whispers that repeat a name moments before it is spoken aloud, of voices in the dark that sound too familiar. Superstition, perhaps, but in a city built upon memory, even fear becomes tradition. There are sections of the Ratway where the walls shift with the tides of the lake. When the wind above changes, you can hear the planks groan as if the whole city breathes through these tunnels. Water drips from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic intervals, each drop echoing like a heartbeat slowed by thought. It is a sound both comforting and terrible. Comforting because it means the city is still alive. Terrible because it reminds you that you are living inside something that should have drowned long ago. Those who have studied Riften's architecture claim that the Ratway began as an accident, a collapse during the first rebuilding after the fire. When the survivors found the caves beneath the lake, they expanded them, built over them, and eventually forgot they existed. But others say it was deliberate, that the early masons built these tunnels not to support the city, but to contain it, a labyrinth to hold its sins, a vessel to store what the surface could not carry. Whatever the truth, the result is the same. The Ratway is both foundation and confession. It holds up the weight of a city that would fall without it, and in return, it absorbs everything that city cannot face. Every few years, the guards seal one of the entrances. They say it's for safety, that too many drunks and thieves disappear down there. But the entrances always reopen, sometimes by accident, sometimes by intention. It's as if the Ratway itself refuses to be forgotten. Once, during a particularly harsh winter, the lake froze solid for a month. The people of Riften said the city was finally still, but below, in the tunnels, the ice cracked from the inside. The ratway kept breathing, as if exhaling the ghosts of the cold above. When spring came, it was the only part of Riften untouched by frost. There's a room deep in the ratway that few dare to enter, a chamber carved from old stone, older than the city. Its walls are etched with lines too worn to read, circles and marks that seem to shift when the torchlight moves. Some say it was a Dwemer workshop. Others believe it was a temple. But those who have spent time there agree on one thing. The air feels heavier, as if thick with unspoken words. Scholars from the College of Winterhold once sent a mage to study it. He returned after 2 days, pale, silent, and unwilling to explain what he saw. When pressed, he said only this: "Some echoes don't fade, they wait." Then he left Riften and was never seen again. The Ratway teaches a different kind of philosophy, one the Stoics would have understood in part and feared in the rest. It teaches that survival is not resistance but surrender, that sometimes to endure the world, you must let it pass through you like water through stone. The people who live down here have learned to become porous. They absorb pain quietly, and when it becomes too heavy, they let it drip away into the dark. There's wisdom in that, a quiet, weary wisdom, the kind that doesn't shine, but hums low and steady in the bones. Above, Riften laughs, trades, and prays. Below, it remembers. Each sound that falls through the cracks, each argument, each bargain, each lie, lands softly on the Ratway stones and stays there. The tunnels have become the city's archive, a library written in echo instead of ink. If you listen closely, you might hear it, a faint murmur, like water flowing backwards. It's the city speaking to itself, telling its story again and again, until even the truth sounds like a memory. The Stoics spoke of the world as a great body, each part in harmony with the rest. If that is so, then Riften's Ratway is its lungs. It takes in everything foul, everything unwanted, and gives back breath to the living world above. It is not beautiful, it is not clean, but it is essential. Without it, Riften would suffocate beneath its own reflection. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden in these tunnels, that darkness, when understood, does not destroy light. It preserves it, it gives it shape. It teaches it where not to go. The Ratway endures, not because it is hidden, but because it listens. It is the city's conscience and its forgiveness. Part 9. The Lesson of Brynjolf. If Riften has a conscience, it does not wear robes or armor. It walks quietly in red hair and leather gloves and answers to the name Brynjolf. He is not a hero. He does not pretend to be. He is, at most, a man who has seen too much of the world to still hate it. And that, in Riften, is as close to wisdom as one can get. Brynjolf is older now than he looks. His voice carries the softness of someone who has learned the futility of shouting. He spends his mornings in the Ragged Flagon, a place that smells of wet wood, oil, and the faint sweetness of spilled mead. When newcomers arrive, he watches them, not with suspicion, but with the patient curiosity of a teacher who has seen every kind of mistake before. He asks questions, always the same ones. Do you listen? Do you learn? Do you last? If they answer too quickly, he smiles and shakes his head. The lesson has already begun. Those who know him say he once believed in honor, the kind that can be measured, tested, and kept. But honor is a brittle thing in Riften. It bends under hunger, snaps under fear, and vanishes under gold. So Brynjolf changed his definition. He began to call honor something else: consistency. Be the same man in shadow as you are in light, he tells his recruits. If you're a liar, then lie well. If you're honest, then stay honest, even when it costs you. but never forget. Who you are in the moment no one's watching. It's not virtue, it's memory. The one thing the city has never learned to keep. There's a story the guild tells, half joking, half reverent. Once, a young thief tried to steal from Maven herself. He was clever, too clever. He lifted a gold ring from one of her guards and slipped it into his own pocket before anyone saw. When Brynjolf found out, he didn't punish the boy. He simply asked, "Do you know what you just took?" The boy said, "A ring." Brynjolf laughed softly. "No," he said, "you took permission, and she'll collect it when she wants to." The next day, the boy left Riften and never returned. Brynjolf never mentioned him again. He does not teach through threat. He teaches through consequences. In Riften, that is the closest thing to truth. When Mercer Frey betrayed the guild, Brynjolf did not rage. He mourned quietly. "Men like Mercer," he said, "believe the world is something to win. They forget the world never promised to play fair." He led the rebuilding of the guild not through speeches, but through quiet example, repairing what could be repaired, burying what could not. He understood something the younger thieves did not, that leadership is not control, but endurance. You do not force people to follow. You simply walk long enough that they realize you're going the same way. To listen to Brynjolf speak is to hear Riften distilled into a single voice, half wisdom, half resignation. He does not romanticize the city. He calls it what it is, rot that refuses to die. But there's admiration in his tone when he says it, because rot, in its way, is proof of life. "You can't have growth without decay," he once said. "The trick is learning which you are at any given moment." That philosophy, simple, unpretentious, has kept more men alive in the tunnels than any blade. He tells his recruits to steal not for greed, but for rhythm, to take what can be taken, to lose what must be lost, and to understand that every exchange is temporary, even freedom. There's a place near the back of the flagon where the light barely reaches and the air smells of dust and sleep. It's where Brynjolf keeps the guild's records, not ledgers, not tallies, but stories. A name, a deed, a lesson learned too late. He writes them in a careful hand, not for remembrance, but for forgiveness. He says, if we forget what we did wrong, we'll start calling it right. And so the pages grow heavier, the ink darker, until they resemble something like a prayer, not to gods, but to time, to the idea that mistakes, when written down, can become instruction instead of inheritance. Sometimes when the city above grows too loud, Brynjolf climbs to the docks. He stands there, hands folded behind his back, watching the reflection of lanterns tremble in the water. No one approaches him, not out of fear, but out of respect for the silence he carries. He looks like a man listening to something only he can hear. When asked once what he thinks about in those moments, he replied, "The water doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the truth either. It just shows you what you bring to it. That's all any of us do." He paused, looked out across the lake, and smiled faintly. Some of us just do it quieter. For all his calm, there are traces of sorrow in him. It lingers behind his jokes, in the way his laugh never reaches his eyes. He has seen too many men fall, to greed, to fear, to the promise of something better. He has buried friends whose names he never speaks aloud, not because he forgets them, but because he refuses to let the city take their memory too. To remember in Riften is to disobey it. And yet, for all this weight, there is no bitterness in him. He moves through the city like the tide beneath the docks, steady, invisible, essential. When he speaks of the guild, he calls it a family, though not the kind poets write about. A family of necessity, of fragments that fit together only because they are broken in compatible ways. There's a young thief, new to the guild, who once asked him, "Do you ever regret it, all of this?" Brynjolf smiled, then looked toward the ceiling where the muffled sound of the city filtered down through wood and water. "Regret?" he said softly. "No. Regret is just nostalgia for a different kind of mistake." The boy didn't understand, but he would. Riften teaches in repetition. Some say Brynjolf once prayed to Nocturnal. Others say he stopped after Mercer's betrayal, but perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. When asked about gods, he simply shrugs. "I've seen too many men use them as excuses. We steal in the dark, but the light above isn't much better at telling the truth." He pauses, then adds, "If Nocturnal's watching, she's welcome to the show." That's the closest thing to faith Riften allows, a kind of reverence for the irony of it all. In the quiet hours when the flagon grows still, Brynjolf sits by the same old table, a candle burning low beside him. He doesn't read or write. He simply watches the flame. It dances in the draft, bending but never going out. And in that small, trembling light, the city seems almost peaceful. Maybe he sees himself in that flame, flickering, uncertain, but refusing to die. A light that has stopped pretending to be pure, content instead to simply exist. If there is a lesson in Brynjolf, it is not how to steal or how to lead. It is how to endure without becoming the thing you despise. How to move through corruption without dissolving into it. How to live in on reflection without losing your shape. He once said, "Every man's a thief. Some steal gold, some steal trust, some steal time. But if you give back more than you take, you'll never owe the world a thing." Perhaps that is why the city respects him, because he has found a way to live among thieves without becoming just another one. Above, the lake sighs against the wooden piers. The city continues, unaware that somewhere below, a man sits in the half-light, listening to the echoes of what once was, and teaching the art of quiet honesty to those who have forgotten the sound of it. Riften does not deserve him, but then, perhaps, that is why he stays. Part 10. The Shadows of Nocturnal. There is a darkness beneath Riften that even the thieves do not claim. It is not part of the Ratway nor the guild's domain. It lies deeper still, a silence beneath the silence, where even echoes seem to hold their breath. The people call it the Shadow's Rest. The guild calls it the Lady's Veil, but those who have felt its presence know another name for it, Nocturnal. To the uninitiated, she is merely myth. A story whispered over mead and smoke, a name spoken for luck before a dangerous job. But in Riften, myth and memory are the same thing. Every whisper leaves a mark, and enough marks become a truth. Nocturnal is not worshipped. She is acknowledged. She is not a god in the way Mara or Akatosh are. She does not offer comfort or command obedience. She does not promise love or forgiveness or destiny. She offers only this, to be seen by the unseen and to see what others cannot. Her gift is clarity, and her curse is the same. There is no temple to Nocturnal in Riften, but there are places where her influence lingers. The corners of rooms where candlelight never reaches. The pools of water that never ripple, even when footsteps pass beside them. The moments just before dawn when the city seems to forget what it is. Those who serve her, the nightingales, do not pray aloud. Their devotion is silence. Their covenant, secrecy. They do not kneel, they vanish. And in vanishing, they become her reflection. It is said that when a person truly gives themselves to Nocturnal, their shadow detaches from them, not as loss, but as liberation. The self becomes two, the one that walks and the one that watches. Perhaps that is why the thieves revere her. She understands what it means to live unseen, to make absence itself into strength. Brynjolf once said, "She's not a goddess, she's the truth we pretend not to see." And perhaps that is the most accurate worship of all, for Nocturnal does not demand temples or hymns. She demands acknowledgement. To walk through Riften is to walk through her shadow. Every unspoken word, every hidden gesture is a kind of prayer. In that sense, every thief is already her acolyte, not through faith, but through instinct. They move in darkness not to hide, but to belong. For in darkness there is equality. No faces, no thrones, no judgment. Only awareness. There is an old superstition among the guild. Before a job, a thief dips their fingers into a bowl of black water kept in the flagon's corner. No one knows where it came from or who keeps it full. They touch it, whisper a name, sometimes their own, sometimes another's, and then wipe their hand dry without looking at the water again. When asked what it means, Brynjolf only shrugs. "It's not for luck," he says. "It's for remembering. If you forget your reflection, you start stealing from yourself." The nightingale's sanctum lies somewhere beneath the city, deeper even than the ratway's roots. Few have seen it, and fewer still returned unchanged. They say it is built of stone that reflects no light, a place where time feels slower, where sound travels like thought through water. At its center stands a pool of darkness, not shadow, but the absence of everything. When approached, it ripples faintly, like something breathing beneath the surface. Those who kneel before it say they see themselves not as they are, but as they could have been. Every choice, every hesitation laid bare in the stillness. Some break down weeping, others laugh softly, as if they have just been forgiven for something they never confessed. It is said that Carlia, the nightingale who carried both guilt and grace, once described Nocturnal not as mistress, but as mirror. "She doesn't punish," she said. "She reminds." When pressed further, she added, "Remorse is her prayer, and silence is her answer." Carlia understood something Riften never will, that darkness is not the opposite of light. It is what defines it. Without shadow, brilliance blinds. Without concealment, truth becomes cruelty. Nocturnal's shadow does not suffocate. It shelters. It allows the imperfect to remain unseen, and in that mercy, it grants humanity. Scholars from Solitude and Winterhold dismiss her worship as superstition, a remnant of old cults, a symptom of fear. But those who live in Riften know better. They have seen the way luck bends around the edges of her name. They have watched thieves vanish through doors that should have creaked, guards glance the wrong way, and lanterns flicker just long enough for an escape. Coincidence, perhaps, or perhaps a goddess breathing through the cracks of disbelief. The Stoics spoke of the Logos, the divine order that moves unseen through the world. They said to live well is to live in accordance with it, to accept both fortune and failure as parts of a single truth. Nocturnal, in her quiet way, embodies that same wisdom. She is neither chaos nor order. She is what connects them, the pause between the two, the breath before the decision. Her followers do not seek favor, they seek alignment. To move as shadow moves, unseen, unresentful, unburdened. There are stories of thieves who broke their oaths to her and found themselves cursed not with misfortune, but with clarity. Every lie they told afterward sounded hollow. Every coin they touched felt heavy. They could no longer forget themselves, and that, more than any punishment, was unbearable. Nocturnal's justice is simple. She does not destroy, she reveals. And revelation to those who live by deception is the purest form of fear. And in the deep of night, Brynjolf was asked if he believed in her. He looked toward the ceiling, where a thin beam of light trembled between the planks. He smiled faintly and said, "I don't need to believe in the dark. It's already there." He said no more. But later that night, he left a single coin on the flagon's bar, not for payment, but for offering. It gleamed once in the candlelight, then rolled off the edge and vanished into the shadows. No one touched it again, and in the morning it was gone. Above, Riften wakes and sleeps. Below, the shadow remains, patient, unjudging, eternal. Its presence is not malevolent. It is intimate, a reminder that the unseen is never absent, only unacknowledged. When the city burns its candles at dusk, their light falls across the canals, fracturing on the surface of the water. Each flicker, each ripple is a signature of her hand. The thieves bow without realizing it. The merchants count their coin twice. Even the priests of Mara pause, feeling a chill that is not fear, but recognition. Nocturnal is not a goddess of punishment. She is the acceptance of imperfection, the sanctity of what must remain hidden for truth to survive. And in Riften, where every virtue is shadowed by survival, her presence is not curse, but balance. The city endures because she does, because she forgives what the light cannot, because she watches without ever asking to be seen. Part 11. The Weight of Secrets. There are things heavier than gold in Riften. They are carried in silence, traded in glances, and hidden in smiles. They are called secrets. Every person in this city owns one. Some wear them like jewelry, others hide them like wounds. But all understand the same rule. You are not defined by what you show. You are measured by what you can keep. Riften's air hums with the quiet tension of things unsaid. In the market, conversations end just before truth begins. In the taverns, laughter bends around the edges of unfinished sentences. Even in the temple, prayers are whispered too softly to be overheard. The city listens, always listens, but it pretends not to. To survive here is to understand discretion as a virtue. In a place built on reflection, every word thrown carelessly becomes a ripple, and ripples have a way of reaching places you never meant them to. The Stoics once wrote that speech should be weighed like silver, because even truth, when spoken without thought, can destroy. Riften understands this instinctively. Here, silence is wisdom disguised as fear. Not all secrets are sins. Some are simply too fragile for light. A merchant hides the name of his daughter who fled to Windhelm, because to say it aloud would summon the debt collectors. A priest hides his doubts about Mara, because faith, once questioned, dissolves faster than gold in acid. A guard hides the fact that he has never taken a bribe, because honesty in Riften is mistaken for betrayal. And yet, these secrets do not make them wicked. They make them human. The difference between virtue and survival is often measured in silence. Above Mistveil Keep, in the Jarl's private chambers, there hangs a tapestry embroidered with silver thread. It shows Riften as it once was, a bright city of traders and bridges, untouched by flame. Few have noticed the small detail woven into the lake at its center, a reflection of the same city, upside down, its towers shimmering in reverse. When asked about it, the weaver said only, "Because that is where the truth lives." Perhaps he meant the Ratway. Perhaps he meant something else. Secrets are the city's truest currency. They can buy freedom, forgiveness, even love. They can also buy silence, which in Riften is often more expensive. A man who owes coin can find work. A man who owes a secret can never rest. The Blackbriars built their empire on this understanding. Gold gives you control, information gives you permanence. Maven herself once said, "A favor is worth 10 coins, but a truth untold is worth 10 favors." It was not philosophy, it was arithmetic. Her spies moved through the city unseen, not as assassins, but as listeners. They record whispers the way priests record psalms, faithfully, endlessly, without judgment. And somewhere in her ledgers, each secret finds its place, filed neatly between profit and mercy. The Thieves Guild, for all its shadows, operates by a similar logic. They trade secrets not as weapons, but as promises. A man's reputation here depends not on what he knows, but on what he refuses to say. Brynjolf calls it the quiet code. It is older than law, more binding than fear. Break it, and no gold in Skyrim can buy your voice back. There is an unspoken respect between Maven's spies and Brynjolf's thieves. Both deal in the same commodity. One gathers secrets to rule, the other to survive. They are two reflections of the same truth. That knowledge, in Riften, is the only thing that cannot be stolen. It must be given. The Temple of Mara stands apart from all, this and yet not untouched. Its priests preach love and forgiveness, but even they carry the city's habits in their robes. Acolytes whisper confessions too quietly to be heard, and sometimes the priests pretend not to listen. Forgiveness is granted not through understanding, but through exhaustion. At dusk, when the candles burn low, the reflections of their flames flicker across the temple's floor, shifting like ghosts trapped in amber. A priest once said that every light in Riften is a confession, burning, trembling, temporary. Perhaps that is why their prayers always end with silence. It is not peace they seek, but permission to remain unseen. There are stories of people who tried to live here without secrets. They never last long. A woman once came from solitude, an idealist who believed in transparency. She opened a school by the canal, taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. She spoke loudly, honestly, to everyone. Within a month, her school was empty. Within 3, she was gone. Riften does not exile the truthful. It erases them. The city has no use for light that refuses to bend. Sometimes a secret is not about what is hidden, but what is preserved. An old fisherman at the docks keeps a locked box beneath his bed. He says it holds the ashes of his wife, but no one has ever seen him open it. Once, a boy asked him why he keeps it locked. The old man smiled and said, "Because grief, if left unguarded, becomes gossip." There is something sacred in that logic. To keep something private in Riften is to honor it. Revealing it is a kind of betrayal, not of others, but of meaning itself. The Stoics warned that the wise man speaks little because truth does not need defense. But in Riften, truth does. Here, a word too clear can cut deeper than any dagger. So the wise have learned to dull their honesty, to wrap it in metaphor and laughter, to disguise sincerity as jest. And somewhere between their words, the truth survives, not as fact, but as feeling. In this way, the people of Riften have become poets without realizing it. Every sentence is a riddle, every confession a ruse. And yet, in their subtlety, there is beauty. It is the beauty of imperfection, the elegance of restraint. Once, a scholar from Markarth asked Brynjolf, "How can you live in a place where no one tells the truth?" Brynjolf smiled and replied, "It's easier than living in a place where everyone pretends to." That answer, simple as it was, contains the city's entire philosophy. Riften's people are not liars. They are caretakers of ambiguity. They understand that truth, left exposed, decays. But wrapped in secrecy, it endures. At night, the canals carry the whispers of the day out to the lake. The water does not judge. It listens. Each ripple is a secret released, each wave a confession, returned to Saturn. And when dawn breaks, the surface is smooth again, as if nothing was ever spoken. Perhaps that is Riften's truest miracle, its ability to cleanse itself through forgetting. A city of sin that survives through stillness. A city of secrets that never drowns because it has learned how to float. The weight of secrets does not crush Riften, it anchors it. It keeps the city from drifting too far into illusion, from believing its own stories. Every lie told here contains a fragment of truth, and every truth hides behind a merciful lie. Together, they balance. Together, they breathe. And in that balance lies the city's strange serenity, a calm born not of virtue but of understanding, that to know too much is to suffer, and to say too much is to disappear. So Riften speaks softly and listens always. Not because it fears discovery, but because it knows that silence is the only thing the shadows cannot steal. Part 12. The water remembers. If stone endures and fire consumes, then water remembers. It does not choose what to keep. It simply carries. Every drop in Riften's canals has touched something forgotten. Ash from the Great Fire, blood from a quarrel in the docks, ink from a contract that changed a life. The lake gathers it all without judgment, without preference, and in its dark mirror the city sees itself exactly as it is. The people say Lake Honrick has no bottom, that somewhere below the silt and shadow, past the roots of drowned trees and the bones of old bridges, the lake opens into a space without end, a void that hums like a memory too heavy to surface. Fishermen swear their nets sometimes catch whispers instead of fish, the soft murmuring of words never meant to be heard again. They throw them back, pretending not to notice the ripples that follow their boats all the way home. Whether or not that's true doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone in Riften believes it could be. The city's lifeblood flows through its canals, thin veins carved between wooden bones. Each plank, each bridge, each rope ladder leans slightly over the water, as if paying tribute to it. The people have long stopped fearing the lake. They depend on it now, wash their hands in it, pour their waste into it, and whisper their regrets to it at night. For all their corruption, they trust the water more than they trust each other, because it never repeats what it hears. Sometimes, when the fog is thick enough to blur the line between sky and reflection, the city disappears. It becomes two Riften, one above, one below, each pretending to be the real one. And in that stillness, it's hard to tell which is which. Children lean over the docks to stare at their reflections, trying to decide whether they are looking down or up. The older folk tell them not to. Don't meet your reflection too long, they say, or it'll start remembering you. They mean it kindly. In Riften, remembrance is a dangerous thing. There's an old superstition tied to the lake's edge. When someone dies, their family tosses a single coin into the water, not for passage to the afterlife, but to anchor the soul's reflection. The coin sinks, and the ripples spread, carrying the name of the dead into every corner of the city's reflection. It's not about mourning. It's about balance. Each death must be recorded in the lake, or else the living lose their place in it, because the water, in its way, keeps count. In the days after the Great Fire, when the city was ash and silence, the survivors saw the lake turn black for 3 days. Not from soot, from memory. The water had drunk too much of their grief, and for a while it refused the light. Fishermen said their oars dipped into shadows that clung to the wood. Even the priests stayed away, afraid to baptize in what had become the city's sorrow. But then, on the 4th morning, as the smoke cleared and the first sunlight touched the water, the darkness lifted. Not all at once, but slowly, like forgiveness. And in that moment, the people of Riften made a vow, unspoken but deeply understood, that whatever else they built, they would never again try to own the water. They would build around it, over it, beside it, but never upon it. They knew better than to command something that remembers. Maven Blackbriar once stood on her balcony overlooking the lake. The wind moved her hair, the reflection of her estate shimmered below. Her daughter asked what she saw. "Debt," she said. The girl laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Maven wasn't smiling. She understood that Riften's strength came not from its walls, but from its ability to hold memory without drowning in it. Her empire of coin mirrored the lake, deep, dark, and always listening. She didn't fear the water, she respected it, because she, too, remembered everything. There are those who say the Thieves Guild was born from the lake's reflection, that once, long ago, a man stared into the water too long and saw a version of himself that moved when he did not. He followed that reflection down into the tunnels beneath the docks, and there, in the dark, he learned that shadows can be loyal if you give them something to guard. True or not, the story fits. For the Guild's existence mirrors the lake's nature perfectly. Quiet, essential, invisible. Taking what it must, returning what it can. Every evening as the city exhales into twilight, the canals glow faintly with torchlight and the last embers of the sky. It is a beautiful sight, the kind that tempts poets to write and thieves to forget their guilt for a few heartbeats in those reflections. Riften looks almost innocent. The grime softens, the decay turns golden, and for a moment the city appears redeemed. But the water remembers what the eye chooses to forget. It remembers every scream that once echoed through these alleys. It remembers every deal whispered in the fog, every hand shaken in deceit. It holds them all, but it does not accuse. It only reflects. And that, perhaps, is its most merciful act. The Stoics believe that all things return to their origin, fire to the sky, earth to the soil, and spirited to the Logos, the eternal order. If that is true, then perhaps the souls of Riften do not ascend. They settle, they sink into the water, becoming part of the city's memory, a collective calm that hums beneath the wood and stone. Maybe that's why the lake never dries, no matter how long the drought. It is fed not by streams or springs, but by remembrance. At times, the water grows restless. Waves lap against the docks without wind, and the city's reflection ripples as if trying to wake itself. Those nights, the priests light candles by the edge of the canals. They say it calms the water. That flame soothes memory. But perhaps it is the other way around. That memory soothes flame. Because no matter how deep the night, the lake always returns to stillness. It forgives the disturbances of the living, as if knowing that all storms end where they began. Brynjolf once told a new recruit, "The city's not as cruel as it looks. It's just honest. It shows you what you give it." He was talking about people, but he might as well have been talking about the water. To look into Lake Honrik is to see yourself divided. One part above, alive and moving, another below, calm and unchanging. Both are you. Both are true. But only one lasts. There's a place at the northern pier where the water runs stillest. They call it the Mirror's Eye. Old sailors say that if you stare into it long enough, you'll see your past drift toward you. Faces, choices, things you thought you'd left behind. But only the brave keep looking. The rest turn away, afraid they'll see themselves as the city does. Not as hero or villain, but as part of the same current, pulled along by the same invisible tide. And maybe that's the point. In Riften, redemption is not earned, it's remembered. When dawn comes, the lake is silver again. The first light moves across its surface like a hand smoothing a wrinkled page. Fishermen push their boats from the docks, and the city wakes to its own reflection once more. The noise returns, barrels rolling, guards shouting, merchants laughing, but beneath it all, the water hums its quiet song. Unseen, unending. It listens, it forgives, it endures. Because water does not judge, it remembers Part 20, the House of Quiet Deals. Every city has a place where power pretends to be polite. In Riften, that place is Mistveil Keep. It stands above the canals like a weary parent, grand from a distance, but up close you can see the age in its stones. Moss creeps between the bricks, the banners are faded, and the guards posted at the gates look less like protectors and more like men counting down their hours. Inside, the air smells of parchment and wax. Conversations move slowly, like oaths weighed before they are spoken. This is not where orders are given. This is where favors are traded. The Jarl, Layla Lawgiver, still holds the throne, though most would agree the throne now holds her. She is kind, perhaps too kind for a city that feeds on strength. Her voice is gentle, her eyes too honest for the room she sits in. There is something tragic in her manner, as if she still believes that law can exist where survival rules. And so she smiles, and signs, and compromises, each signature a small surrender to the world she cannot control. Beside her stands Anuriel, her steward, sharp where the Jarl is soft, quiet where the Jarl is kind. Anuriel speaks the language of this city fluently. Every word she utters is precise, each silence deliberate. She does not command. She arranges. If the Jarl is the candle, Anuriel is the hand that decides how far the light reaches. Most of Riften's politics happen in that hall, not through speeches or proclamations, but through the simple art of negotiation. A merchant asks for permission to expand his stall. A guard captain requests additional funding for patrols. A priest petitions for more candles for Mara's temple. Each request comes with something unsaid, each answer with a price. "Of course," says Anuriel, her tone warm but final. And with that one word, a dozen small debts are created. It is never coercion. It is cooperation. Or so everyone tells themselves. Maven Blackbriar visits Mistveil Keep rarely, but her absence is as present as her shadow. Her influence fills every corridor, in the way the guards straighten when her name is spoken, in the way letters from her estate are opened before any others. She does not need to rule Riften from a throne. She rules it from expectation. The fear of disappointing her keeps the city running smoother than any decree. One might think the Jarl resents her, but resentment requires power. What remains between them is something quieter, mutual dependence disguised as respect. Layla knows that without Maven's gold, the city would crumble. And Maven knows that without the Jarl's seal, her gold would have nowhere respectable to shine. It is an arrangement that neither loves, but both understand. In Riften, that's as close to peace as anyone gets. There's a room at the back of the keep, small, lined with old ledgers. Few enter it anymore. It smells of mildew and forgotten ink. But if you run your fingers along the shelves, you can still feel the indentations left by signatures. Years of decisions pressed into paper, decisions that changed lives, though none of the names are remembered. One page reads, "Permission granted to the Blackbriar family for the maintenance of the southern docks." Another, "Waiver issued for meadery expansion. Taxation deferred." Each entry seems harmless, but together they form a map of quiet surrender. The keep has become a monument not to authority, but to acquiescence. At midday, the keep's great hall fills with light. It falls through the tall windows and scatters across the floor, breaking on the long table where decisions are made. For a moment, the gold and dust glow together, making the room look almost holy. But the illusion fades as soon as the light moves. The dust remains. It always does. The servants move through the hall silently. They carry food, papers, wine. They see everything. They say nothing. Each knows more about the city than any council member, yet their knowledge is their curse. In Riften, awareness without authority is a kind of imprisonment. They survive by forgetting. Visitors from other holds often find Mistveil unsettling. They expect grandeur and instead find fatigue. They expect rulership and instead find diplomacy turned into routine. They leave calling the Jarl weak. But those who stay long enough begin to see the genius in her stillness. She does not fight the current. She lets it carry her where it must. And somehow, the city stays afloat. There is an old saying among her court, "Here the law bends so it will not break." It is meant as mockery, but it holds truth. Rigidity would have destroyed Riften long ago. It survives through flexibility, the same flexibility that makes it impossible to stand upright for long. In the evenings, when the hall empties and the city below glows faintly through the mist, Anuriel stands by the window. From here, she can see everything: the docks, the marketplace, the smoke rising from the meadery. She watches it not with pride, but with calculation. To her, Riften is a living equation. Each act of mercy must be balanced by debt. Each promise must be weighted by silence. She tells herself this is justice. And perhaps, in a way, it is. Justice is just another form of balance. And in this city, balance is survival. Sometimes she touches the ring on her finger. An old, simple thing, tarnished by years of ink and sweat. No one knows where it came from. She never takes it off. When asked, she says, "It's a reminder." But of what, she never explains. The Stoics taught that virtue is not the absence of corruption, but the mastery of it. To know the world's ugliness and still choose. Clarity, that is strength. By that measure, perhaps Riften's court is not corrupt at all. Perhaps it is merely wise. It knows the world cannot be saved by purity, only managed by compromise. Every decision made in Mistveil Keep is a kind of confession. Every deal struck here begins with apology and ends with gratitude. It is a theater of civility built upon necessity. No one believes in righteousness anymore, only in endurance. And yet there is something profoundly human in it, the attempt to make order out of decay, to speak softly while the world crumbles around you. When the torches are extinguished and only moonlight fills the hall, the air grows colder. The great table, bare now, holds the faint reflections of everything discussed upon it. Deals made, promises broken, oaths exchanged in measured tones. The light trembles against the stone, as if uncertain whether it should stay. Outside, the canals murmur softly, carrying the city's secrets back toward the lake. Inside, the silence thickens, not empty, but full. Full of things agreed upon, but never said. Full of understanding that no one will write down. The kind of silence that holds the shape of words long after they've vanished. Mistveil. Keep sleeps, but its walls never do. They listen. They remember. Every sigh, every decision, every bargain. It's all there, etched into the stone. A history not of triumph, but of persistence. The city below continues as always, its lights flickering in the fog. And from her balcony, Anuriel watches them one last time before turning away. She whispers something too soft to carry, a line the lake might hear, or perhaps only the air. Nothing here is pure, but everything still stands. And in Riften, that is enough. Part 14. The Watchers on the Bridge. Riften has many bridges. They crisscross the canals like scars, beautiful from a distance, but reminders of every wound the city has endured. And on these bridges stand its watchers, the guards of Riften, the men and women who see everything, and, over time, learn to say nothing. At dawn, they begin their patrols. Boots clatter against wet wood. The fog rises from the canals, and for a moment, the city feels almost holy. Its sounds muffled, its sins still asleep. A guard leans against a post, watching his own reflection blur beneath him. He wonders, for the 1000th time, why he still does this. He tells himself it's duty. He tells himself it's stability. But deep down, he knows the truth. It's habit. In Riften, even morality becomes routine. Most guards here are not cruel. They are tired. They've seen too much. The same crimes, the same excuses, the same people punished and replaced. They've learned that justice is not a circle, but a spiral. It turns endlessly inward until it collapses upon itself. When a thief is caught, they look away as he's dragged below. When a noble cheats, they bow a little deeper. Not because they approve, but because they've understood something simple. The city does not reward resistance. It rewards endurance. Their commander, Captain Veldar, once believed in reform. He arrived from Whiterun years ago, full of hope and straight-backed conviction. He thought he could cleanse Riften, root out its rot, bring dignity to the uniform. Now he keeps a flask in his pocket and speaks in metaphors instead of orders. When asked about justice, he says, "It's like water, lad. You can hold it for a while, but it always finds the cracks." His men laugh when he says it, not because it's funny, but because it's true. The guards know the names of every beggar, every fence, every drunken merchant. They know who's lying and who's merely trying to survive. They stopped asking questions long ago. It's not their job to change anything, only to keep it from falling apart. A younger recruit once tried. He refused a bribe, arrested a merchant tied to Maven's estate. The next week, he was reassigned to the Northern Gate, the one that opens once a month, if at all. He lasted 2 weeks before resigning. No one blamed him. Riften doesn't punish righteousness. It starves it. Every bridge in the city has its watcher. By day, they direct traffic, keep peace between dockhands and traders. By night, they stand in the mist, listening to the city breathe. They can tell the time by the sounds alone, the creak of boats against wood, the distant laughter from the flagon, the way the canals grow quieter just before dawn. They are not poets, but they have learned the rhythm of the city better than any scholar. They know its moods. They can sense when a storm is coming, not by the wind, but by the silence that falls before it. Some say the guards are blind to corruption, that they turn away for coin. And yes, some do, but most turn away for peace. In a city built on reflection, staring too long into the truth means drowning in it. One guard once said, "Every man in Riften wears armor. Ours just happens to be visible." He tapped his chest plate, the sound echoing through the fog. Then he looked out over the water and added, "Still, it rusts the same." On certain nights, when the fog thickens and even the torches dim, the watchers say the city speaks to them, not with words, but with presence. A ripple where there was no wind, a footstep on a bridge long empty, a whisper that sounds too familiar. They do not tell the priests, they do not tell each other, they simply nod to the dark and continue their rounds. It's easier to believe the city is alive than to admit they've become part of its silence. The Stoics taught that peace is not the absence of pain, but the mastery of it. Perhaps these guards, without knowing it, are the truest Stoics in Skyrim. They endure each day without reward, each injustice without outrage. They stand in the rain and the rot, still believing in something, anything, even if that belief has no name. Their strength is not courage. It is patience, the kind that wears down the edges of despair until it becomes something like acceptance. At sunset, when the light bleeds gold through the mist, the watchers stand on their bridges, their shadows stretching long across the water. From below, they look like statues, sentinels carved from fatigue. Children wave at them from passing boats. The guards wave back. It's the only time their faces soften. They know the city's children will grow into its thieves and merchants, its guards and liars, and that nothing will truly change. But for a moment, as the laughter echoes off the water, the city feels light again, almost kind. There's an old bridge near the southern gate, half rotted, half forgotten. Its boards groan underfoot, and the lantern that once hung from its post burned out long ago. But the guards never replace it. When asked why, Captain Veldar says, "Because darkness needs a place to rest, too." He's right. Even shadows tire of being chased. One night, during the long winter, the fog froze solid around the bridges. A rare sight, the whole city trapped in crystal silence. The guards stood motionless, breath clouding in the cold air. One of them whispered, "It's like the city's holding its breath." Another replied, "Or remembering how to." They stood that way for hours, until the first crack of ice broke the stillness. Then they laughed, a small tired sound, and resumed their rounds. Not because anything had changed, but because that's what they do. At the end of their shift, when dawn breaks pale over Lake Honrich, the guards remove their helmets. The air smells of wood smoke and mead, and the city begins to stir. For a moment, they are just people again, men and women with families, with debts, with dreams they no longer chase. They walk home across the bridges they've guarded all night, their reflections walking beside them in the water. Sometimes they glance down and see themselves double, the person they are and the person they were trying to be. They do not linger. In Riften, that's a dangerous habit. Perhaps one day, someone will build a statue for them, not for heroism, but for endurance. A monument to the quiet watchers who kept the city breathing, even when it had forgotten how. Until then, they will remain what they have always been, shadows with swords, standing between light and water, listening for footsteps that never come. And when asked why, they stay, Captain Veldar answers simply, "Because someone has to." He says it without pride, without irony, just truth. And in Riften, truth spoken softly is still a form of courage. Part 15. The Drowned Bells. There was a time when the bells of Riften rang across the lake. Their sound was not grand like the bells of Solitude, nor solemn like those in Windhelm. It was a softer chime, a voice meant for comfort, not command. Each note drifted over the water like prayer made visible. They rang for weddings, for births, for forgiveness. And when they rang together, the whole city seemed to pause and breathe in rhythm with them. That was before the fire. When the Great Fire consumed half the city, the Temple of Mara stood at its center. The flames climbed the spire and melted the bell ropes, and the bells, 3 of them, fell through the roof. 2 cracked when they hit the stone floor. The 3rd rolled into the canal and sank. When the smoke cleared, the city tried to rebuild, but the sound never returned. Even after the temple was restored, the priests chose not to raise new bells. They said Mara would not need them anymore, that the water now carried her voice. On quiet nights, when the wind is still and the canals are calm, people say they can hear a faint sound, a low, distant hum beneath the rippling surface, like metal remembering its purpose. They call it the drowned prayer. Some dismiss it as a story. Others swear it's real. Children are told that if you listen closely at dusk, the bells will answer your thoughts, not in words, but in feeling. You won't hear what you want, but what you need. In Riften, that kind of honesty is rare. Maybe that's why they still listen. The priests at the Temple of Mara have grown quieter over the years. They still perform the rites, marriages, blessings, the occasional confession, but their sermons are shorter now. Their smiles, gentler. They no longer promise salvation. They promise understanding. That, in itself, is mercy enough. One of them, an old priest named Elgrim, tends the candles at dusk. He's been doing it for decades, his hand steady despite the tremor in his breath. Once a traveler asked him why he never tried to recover the bells. Elgrim smiled. "If a prayer is answered," he said, "it doesn't need to be repeated." To walk inside the temple is to feel time soften. The light moves slowly through the high windows, turning dust into gold. The floorboards creak underfoot, and somewhere in the walls, the faint sound of dripping water echoes like a heartbeat. In the center stands the statue of Mara, the goddess of love, of compassion, of bonds that hold even in darkness. Her face is serene, but if you look closely, there is a crack along her left cheek, a scar from the fire that no craftsman ever dared to repair. Some say it was left that way intentionally, to remind the faithful that even divinity can be marked by grief. Couples still come to be wed here. They stand before the scarred statue, their vows quiet but sincere. The priest's voice trembles as he speaks the old blessing. May your love be as patient as stone and as forgiving as water. When the ceremony ends, the couple walks outside and tosses a flower into the canal. It's an old tradition, a way of asking the drowned bells to remember them. The petals drift for a moment, then vanish beneath the surface. The priests say that means the blessing was accepted. The Stoics would have understood that gesture, not as superstition, but as surrender. To release what you love is to love it completely. There are rumors that one of the bells still rests intact beneath the temple. Divers have tried to find it. None ever returned with proof. Some say the bell is lodged in the old stone foundation, its edges fused with coral and silt. Others claim it sank deeper, into the hollow chambers that predate the city, the same forgotten veins that feed the ratway. Whatever the truth, the water guards it well. And perhaps that's the point. Faith, once submerged, does not disappear. It simply changes form. It becomes quieter, more personal, more human. Mara's priests believe that compassion is not noise, but presence, not preaching, but listening. They sit by the canal each evening, watching the reflection of the temple shimmer in the water. When asked what they pray for, they say nothing at all. They have learned that the silence between prayers is often the answer itself. The city still mocks them, of course. Riften has little patience for idealists. The merchants call them dreamers. The thieves call them hypocrites. But the same men who scoff at the temple will find themselves standing at its doors in the quiet hours, when coin and cunning offer no comfort. They come not for forgiveness, but for permission to stop pretending they are unbroken. And Mara, in her infinite stillness, gives it to them. Once a year, on the anniversary of the fire, the priests gather by the lake. At dusk, they light candles, hundreds of them, and place them on wooden planks that float across the water. Each candle represents a life lost, a memory unspoken, a kindness forgotten. As the candles drift, their flames blur into trembling gold. The wind moves them gently toward the center of the lake, where the water deepens and the bells are said to rest. One by one, the flames fade, their light swallowed by the reflection of the stars. It is a quiet ceremony. No hymns, no speeches. Only the faint ringing sound, not from the sky, but from below, the drowned bells answering their prayers. When the last candle fades, the priests remain by the shore. Some weep, some smile. All of them listen. The water is black and still, but beneath it, something moves, slow, resonant, like a heartbeat that belongs to the city itself. Forgiveness, Elgrim says softly, isn't forgetting, it's remembering without pain. And the others nod, because they've all felt it. That strange peace that follows sorrow like dawn after the longest night. The Stoics taught that acceptance is the highest virtue, to see the world not as you wish it to be, but as it is, and love it anyway. In that sense, the Temple of Mara has become Riften's final Stoic sanctuary. Its priests no longer promise redemption. They promise endurance. They remind the people that even the worst can be transformed, that even sin has texture, that compassion is not weakness, but recognition. And perhaps that is why the drowned bells still hum beneath the water, because mercy, like sound, never truly dies. It only changes frequency. At night, when the city sleeps and the temple stands alone, the wind passes through the cracks in the walls and hums against the hollow stone where the bells once hung. It sounds almost like a voice, not divine, not human, but something between the two. Those who hear it say the sound lingers in their dreams, a vibration in the chest, a faint echo in the bones. When they wake, the city feels different, not cleaner, not brighter, but gentler, as if something unseen has forgiven it, quietly, without asking for anything in return. And so the bells of Riften remain drowned. Their song muted, their memory alive. The priests still light candles, the lovers still toss their flowers, the thieves still whisper their apologies to the lake. The city still sins, still lies, still survives. But beneath it all, somewhere in the black water, the bells still ring. And if you listen closely, not with your ears, but with your patience, you might hear them too. A soft, trembling sound, a promise kept, a forgiveness given, a city remembered. Part 16. Epilogue, the city that sleeps twice. At night, when the last lantern fades and the market falls silent, Riften exhales. The water stills, the wind slows, and the city begins its second life, the life it lives in memory. They call it the sleep between reflections. It is when the city forgets to pretend, when its shadows rest and its echoes wander freely. Above, the houses are quiet. Below, the canals hum with soft, unseen music, a melody without sound, the rhythm of things that have survived too long to need words. In this half-sleep, the city looks peaceful. The bridges curve like ribs, the canals gleam like veins beneath moonlight. The water mirrors the stars, and for a few hours, Riften seems infinite, as if it has forgiven itself. But that's the trick of reflection. Forgiveness always looks like peace from a distance. Somewhere in the flagon, Brynjolf sits alone. The others have gone. The laughter and the coin have settled into dust and quiet. He runs a finger along the rim of his cup, tracing a circle worn smooth by years of habit. He does not drink anymore, not out of piety, but out of patience. He has learned that memory is a stronger intoxication than mead. Above him, a single lantern burns. Its flame flickers low, painting slow patterns across the damp stone. In the shifting light, his reflection shivers against the table's surface. Not young, not old, just enduring. He whispers something into the cup, a name maybe, or a promise, and leaves it there for the shadows to keep. At the docks, a guard stands his final watch. The fog has settled, thick and silver. He can see nothing beyond the next bridge, but he doesn't need to. He knows the city by sound alone, the soft creak of ropes, the drip of condensation from the beams above, the faint lap of water against wood. He adjusts his posture, hands resting on the railing, eyes half closed. He is not looking for danger. He is listening for reassurance, that the city still breathes, that it still remembers how. He hears it, a whisper of current beneath the boards, a sound like an exhale through old lungs. He nods to himself. That is enough. In Mistveil Keep, Anuriel works by candlelight. The Jarl has long gone to bed. The hall is empty except for the faint crackle of wax and parchment. She flips through ledgers older than she is, their pages brittle, their ink faded to brown. Numbers, names, signatures that no longer belong to anyone living. She pauses over one entry. A decree written in another hand, signed by a long-dead steward. Repairs approved for the temple roof. Payment deferred until harvest. She smiles faintly. There was no harvest that year. The debt remains unpaid. And yet the temple stands. Some debts, she thinks, were never meant to be settled. Some were meant to be remembered. She closes the book and blows out the candle. The smoke curls upward like a question. For a moment she almost answers it. Then she turns away, letting silence finish the thought for her. At the temple of Mara, the bells still sleep beneath the water. The priests have gone to their chambers, but one candle remains burning before the statue, its light trembling against the scar on Mara's cheek. The flame flickers, its reflection rippling across the water pooled at the statue's base. For a heartbeat, the two lights, the flame and its reflection, seem to move together. Then one fades and the other endures. The water hums faintly. A low, resonant sound. Not sorrow, not joy, just presence. Elgrim, too old to sleep, deeply sits in the back pew. He listens with closed eyes. He no longer prays. He only listens. And the silence, faithful as ever, listens back. By the canal, a child drops a pebble into the water. It lands without sound, but the ripples spread wide, touching the posts, the docks, the forgotten timbers of the city's foundation. He watches the circles widen, smiles, and runs home. The ripples linger long after he's gone. They travel through every hidden passage, every submerged tunnel, until at last they reach the heart of the lake. There, in the deep, they wake the memory of the drowned bells. For a moment, the water hums again, soft, low, a lullaby for no one in particular, for the living, for the lost, for the city itself. From above, Riften looks unchanged, the same roofs, the same bridges, the same restless glow of lanterns through fog, but to those who have lived here long enough, the city feels different at night. It feels aware, as if it has become what its people could not, still patient, forgiving. The Stoics might have called it ataraxia, tranquility through understanding. Riften, in its own way, has achieved it, not through virtue, but through exhaustion, the kind that turns bitterness into wisdom. There's a saying among the dock workers, the city sleeps twice, once for the body, once for the soul. The first sleep is restless, filled with hunger, lies, and debt. The second is quiet, a deeper rest, where even the guilty are allowed to dream. No one knows who said it first. Maybe it was a thief, maybe a priest, maybe the city itself, speaking through the hum of its waters. But the saying endures, like everything else here. It drifts through taverns and alleys, across the lips of guards and merchants, until it becomes indistinguishable from truth. At dawn, when the mists begin to lift, Riften wakes again. The fishermen haul their nets, the merchants shout their prices, the thieves make their plans, the priests light their candles. And beneath it all, the water flows as it always has, slow, patient, reflective. The city has learned not to ask for redemption. It has learned that survival, in its own quiet way, is sacred enough. The Stoics said, to live according to nature is to live rightly. Perhaps Riften, in all its contradictions, is closer to nature than any other place in Skyrim. It lies, it loves, it forgives, it forgets, and it continues, always continues. As the sun rises, the reflections sharpen. The city above brightens, the city below deepens. Two worlds moving in harmony, each unaware of the other, each necessary for the other's existence. The bridges gleam with dew. The bells beneath the lake hum one final time before vanishing into silence. And for a brief moment, the whole of Riften, its thieves, its priests, its ghosts, seems to hold its breath, not in fear, in peace. There is no moral here, no redemption, no ruin, only endurance, only the quiet grace of continuation. Riften does not aspire to purity, it aspires to persistence. It has learned the oldest truth the world has to offer, that to keep living, even imperfectly, is its own form of holiness. As the city wakes, a thin breeze ripples the lake's surface. The reflection breaks, then reforms. Light returns to the windows. Laughter returns to the streets. The shadows retreat, but do not vanish. They wait, patient as ever, for night to fall again. And when it does, the city will sleep once more, twice as always. Once for what it has been, and once for what it dares to remember. Because in Riften, memory is not punishment, it is prayer, and the water, faithful as ever, remembers them all.